You know, when you're a gangster, you always show respect. When you're a gangster, you never do anything to disrespect the club. But when you do, you know you're gonna get cracked a couple of times.
In smoky rooms where deals are made, loyalty the ace he's playing. A friend of ours, he'll stand up tall. Through gunfire smoke, he'll never fall. With heart of gold and steel resolve, a mystery we'll never solve.
Brothers and sisters, welcome back. Welcome back to another fantastic edition of the Friend of Ours podcast. This is a limited edition series hosted by your main man, Duke Loves Wrestling. And of course, the Don of Wrestling, one of the greatest of all times, the guy that is the apple of the eye of all of the Gumadas. We're talking about Big Vito LaGrasso. What's going on, Vito?
Hello to everybody out there. Thank you for a wonderful, wonderful introduction. Talking about being, the apple of the eye of Gumads. I was just in, Wisconsin. And let me tell you something. I was the apple of the eye over there, believe me. I know some people caught the pics. They're looking at my work, and they're like, Jesus, WCW Vito's looking better than ever.
Unreal. Yeah. That's interesting there. You did post some clips of your latest incursions. And like you said, it was a flashback almost. Here we are, how many years? 20, 25 years later, and you still look like the guy from back then. In fact, you're in much better shape. So it's kind of ironic there. But yeah, you're turning back the hands of time, so to speak there, Vito. I don't know how you're doing it, brother.
But you want to know what was a great thing? And the people who were in the audience, we drew 1,300 people when I showed up in WCW Vito to kick somebody's ass. It was surreal to a lot of people. And the workers in the back just were looking at me and all like, oh my God, I watched this guy on WCW. I can't believe I'm here with him, and the kid I wrestled was even more like, he was happy, he was honored and respectful. The match was good. And, the people, especially the dads, they come up with their sons and, my son was, hey, I'm a big fan. Hey, you want to grab a Polaroid? Get your selfie phone out. Let's do something here. And a lot of kids came up who didn't have money. I signed that autograph thing. When people came up, there was one father in particular. His daughter wanted a picture, and I set a price. I said, Dad, how much you got? He says, I got $18. All right, come on, put it on the table. Let's make a memory here. Daughter was happy. Gave the dad an extra selfie for himself. He says, thank you so much. Another guy, she went back, he went forth. He has you do Zell. I said, no, if your kid wants a picture with me, come on, I'll take a picture. I think the family of over 20 who drove down with the father in a wheelchair to see me, and the father was a big fan from back in the day. And he said, hey, I know the promoter told you about my father coming. I said, yeah. I said, where is he? He says, he's in a wheelchair over there by the stands. I said, okay, guys, let's go. So I got up from my table with people online. I went over there. I introduced myself to him, shook his hand. And he sat there prouder than proud, and then the whole family got some pics and they thanked me. They even gave me a homemade bottle of wine. So there is some humility in wrestling. There are some good guys in wrestling. And if you do for your fans, they'll always do for you. And I want to thank the people, for coming out and all the pics and the footage that I'm receiving on all my social media. It's great to see. And, guys, I'm still trying to get there one more time, wherever it may be. And if I wasn't in shape or I couldn't do what I do, I wouldn't do it. But as you can see, and proof in the pudding, I'm ready.
He's ready. He's willing. He's able. Let's make it happen, folks. I'm telling you right now. Let's just throw it out there, Vito. Anyone who's interested in doing business, what's the best way they can reach out to you?
You can get to me at Big Vito at BigVito.com. You can contact Duke. You can contact me on my social media at the Big Vito brand. Contact my wife, Noelle Harlow Lagrasso, on her social media, guys. Since hardcore came into this past weekend, I got to feel like me again. And I said, you know what? I could take on any hardcore champion in any, Fed, any division. Anybody's on TV who thinks they're a tough son of a bitch. How about going one on one with probably one of the best hardcore hitters of all time, Big Vito Lagrasso, the Don.
Ooh, there it is. There it is. And listen, when I say people who want to do business, I'm not just talking to you pro wrestling promoters and folks like that. I mean, obviously, I am talking to you, but beyond that, here is a guy that has experience in acting as well. So if you have a television show, if you have a movie, Vito's ready, man. He's already trained. He already knows what to do. Just give him the lines and watch the magic happen. But seriously, folks, this is a great time to start getting things rolling. And you want to make sure that you get to this guy before his schedule fills up because it doesn't take much, you know? So looking forward to hearing from everybody out there who wants to do some business. That's for sure. That's right. Speaking of business, we originally, because folks, we've been covering The Sopranos for the past couple of weeks, and originally I had stated that Phil Leotardo was the biggest villain, the biggest heel in Sopranos history. And again, I was very surprised, pleasantly surprised, that you wonderful listeners out there were reaching out and saying, "No, it's not Phil, man. It's Ralph. Ralph's the guy. Ralph's the guy we hate the most. You got to do one on Ralph. Come on." So we did the kids last week, and we appreciate all the strong support for that episode. People really enjoyed that conversation, especially Vito psychoanalyzing Richie Aprio Jr. in the kind of little, entitled jerk that he is. A lot of people latched on to when I said that Meadow Soprano was like Connie Corleone from The Godfather. That was an interesting little wrinkle there as well that people paid attention to. But we're going to give you what you asked for. So let's talk about Ralph, a guy who legitimately was a piece of work and somebody who, just like real people in real life, right? Everybody's not all the way bad. Everybody's not all the way good. We're human beings. So you could have qualities as a person that some people find charming and useful. In the case of Ralph, Cifaretto is his last name there. But in the case of Ralph, where he was Tony Soprano's top earner, no question about it. He had his hand on those construction jobs and the redevelopment of the waterfront. And he was a guy that knew how to turn a buck. And people like that, you give them a long rope. They may screw up and they may do stupid things that you want to, discipline them for, but they're bringing in more money than the other guys, and you got to make a decision. You know what I mean? If I go too hard on my top earner, he's not going to be around to earn as much money for me, or so it might throw him off his game. I can't have that. So we watched Ralph's bad behavior get a pass over and over and over again until there were no more passes to give. So before we really dig into the specifics, from a general standpoint, Vito, what's your perspective on Ralph Cifaretto?
Well, Ralph is, there's two Ralphs. It's Ralph who's an awful person. Then there's Ralph who is, a concerned good person. But being the two evils, the bad outweighs the good. And when you look at Ralph, he comes off as a big scumbag on the show. I mean, no question about it. His earning capabilities and what he brought to the family were exemplary. They were, pristine. He was the man who made the money for the family. You know, when it came to horse betting, the horse, when it comes to construction jobs, when it came to, there was a figure thrown, $3 million a year he brings to the family. all the no-show jobs and working things, but he was scummy in the way he did business when he beat Paulie, for the code to a job that they had, and Paulie was sinking 50,000. And then when things were going bad in the family, when somebody got hurt or somebody got beat up, he would make these jokes, and the guys didn't like it, and they wanted to beat the shit out of him. I think the worst of the worst that we've seen of him was when he killed Tracy, the stripper, in the back and beat the shit out of her and killed her with his child inside of her. I mean, I think that was the worst of the worst. And you talk about how low can you go? He was the stepfather to who we covered last week, and Jackie Aprio Jr. And he really didn't give the kids sound advice. He kind of led him down the path of getting into the family business when the kid had a brain. So he used him with deception for his own benefit until he couldn't do no more. And then he had Tony gave him the ultimatum. Listen, you know what to do. You schooled him. You did everything. You did guide him, right? You did do this, right? And then, if you want to give him a pass for this, Tony used reverse psychology on Ralph and made him feel guilty. And the end result was the kid got whacked.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Ralph is an interesting character in the sense that we hear him describe his life when he was younger one way. And then you find out from Tony, whether he's talking about Ralph to his psychologist or whatever, you hear a slightly different story than what Ralph is telling people. So, for instance, Ralph claims that he dropped out of high school. In reality, Tony lets it slip that Ralph was actually expelled from high school. He was forced to leave high school. He had one of the girls on a canoe, and the canoe sank, and the girl drowned. And there was a concern that Ralph could have potentially killed that girl. So there's this weird, what Ralph says and then what the truth is, and they're pretty different. I think it was clear, it was made clear that Ralph's mother was abusive toward him. So as a result, when you look at the way that Ralph treated women during his time on The Sopranos, this is the reason why this guy is considered such a heel, such a bad guy, because he was awful to women. He would beat them, he would yell at them, he would cuss them out. He killed a girl, like just crazy stuff that this guy would do. But it does add fuel to the notion that he did not have a good relationship with his own mother. So it's almost like he was inflicting that pain onto others, especially women. Does that make sense, Vito?
Yeah, it does. It does. I mean, sometimes just Ralph's presentation with women wasn't too keen, especially when he was um, dating Jackie Jr.'s mother, and the way he treated Tracy, and the way he just went about his life until a shining moment came on, which really didn't change him too dramatically, but made him realize life and death in a better light when his son passed away. When his son was doing a bow and arrow and it pierced his heart, and then he's laying in a hospital bed, and what do you say at that point? You know what I mean? And then you can go all through the trials and tribulations, but then when you go back to being yourself after such a dramatic thing, what did you really learn?
Yeah. What did you really learn? If you rest back on your old laurels, then you didn't learn much. That's the truth. I want to stay on this point though, because here's the thing, Vito. You and I have been friends for a long time, and we don't just talk about wrestling and sports and all that. We talk about real life. And I know your wife. You know what I mean? You know my family. Like we are what we are. One of the things that I've always respected and appreciated about you and even in talking to your peers, you have always been a safe person for women to not only be in your presence, but legitimately want you around. Like, Vito, look out for us kind of thing. And it's a thing. And when I listen to how your wife talks about you and how you talk about all the things that as a family you guys sacrifice and what have you, and how much you do in order to make sure that your family stays good. When I listen to you talk about, your relationship with your mom, God rest her soul, it's like you're a guy who clearly grew up, had a good relationship with his mom, was taught to respect his mom, and you really loved your mom. And as a result, all the women in your life, friend, relationship, coworker, whatever, you have always been a guy that looks after them. You can go to the beauty salon right now, get your eyebrows done, get your nails done, and the ladies are having a ball. That's just who you are. And I say that, and and I'm a similar person. That's one of the reasons why you and I connect so well, because that's who we are. We're safe people that people know they can come to, they could be around. We're not going to take advantage or do anything crazy. In fact, we're probably going to stick up for them. When you think about the man that you are and your values and how you do things, especially as it relates to women, and then you compare that to the character of Ralph, I want to take it a step further. Talk to me about guys who you've seen in your lifetime, especially guys who are in the life, who are far more like Ralph and far less like Vito. Guys who weren't afraid to abuse a woman. Guys who they may have been a fun guy, a guy who people are supposed to respect, maybe because they're an earner or maybe because they can get things straightened out, make people disappear. But at the same time, they were just vicious and ruthless towards women. And it's like, what the hell's wrong with this person?
No, I definitely met a few guys like that in my time, and they try to be cool. They try to be the boys of the boys. Then you look at how they talk to their wives, their kids, and like how they treat their girlfriends and stuff. And then you back off of them. And once you see that, there were plenty of guys who are wise guys who are like that, and it just you know being with the guys. But then when you see them how they act with their families and the way they talk to their wives, you're like, I really don't like you as much as I used to. And there are plenty of guys out there like that who I've come across in my time. So the difference is that I just didn't have that in me. And I'm not going to sit here and say that every relationship I've had was golden. Everybody has good relationships, great relationships, bad relationships. There were, relationships I've had where, it just didn't work and it was like, fiery, but then there were some relationships that were awesome, but I just never took the final step, to further my life with the person, but that doesn't change the times we had. And as far as women, when I talk to former uh, girlfriends, or I talk to a lot of friends who are ladies, and my wife is present, they all say the same thing about me. Vito is always a gentleman, and that's a big thing, and that's how I was brought up to be. And funny you mentioned my mother. Tomorrow is her death day, and my brothers were at the funeral. Were at the cemetery. Now my mother's been gone 40 years, and my brothers who have went there for 40 years to clean her grave. My brothers always send me a video of them visiting the site, cleaning the grave, trimming the trees, doing stuff. And you talk about um, boys growing into men, but never forgetting their mother. My brothers, I give them kudos, and I give them a lot of respect for doing that, because a lot of people just leave their moms lay in a cemetery and never go. My brothers go regularly after 40 years, and I want to see somebody top that record.
Oof. Yeah, good point. Good point. Do you think that you ever were given a hard time because you're a guy that women could be safe around, and maybe for guys who were more predators who were looking to take advantage, kind of irritated them like you're in the way?
Um, Women liked the way I was, and I wasn't just looking just to get a piece of ass. And a lot of guys just look to get a piece of ass and befriend ladies for that. And like I always used to say, when I used to go out to clubs and everything, I'd be happy. I was happy just dancing all night with all different kinds of ladies and having a great time. I didn't have to take nobody home to top the night off. I had a great time. What was I doing? Enjoying myself and dancing, with all different ladies. So that's how you become, you know, I guess it's a ladies' man, you have that savoir faire, you have that smoothness. And sometimes it's not always about, getting the pot of gold at the end of the night. It's developing relationships and just being a gentleman. Do you know what I mean? So, you know, like I said, no relationship doesn't have any arguments or fights or you go at each other. Everybody has them. Nobody is perfect. My thing is, and what Duke is saying, what my wife has witnessed is that when it comes to treating ladies in the person that I am in persona, who I am, and you know, it's always been a good thing, and it's always been a gentleman thing.
Talk to me about guys who were big time earners, but they were also pain in the ass. I mean, from what you have ever seen, what's the best way to manage a person? Like, do you just leave them alone and you just look the other way, or is there a way that you can rein a guy like that in?
So here's the secret to keeping your status and being good. You know, I guess it's street politics, guys. And you're cool with the guys there, you laugh with them, you're friends with them, you have a drink with them, but as soon as they venture off into, hey, you want to do this? Nah, yeah, I gotta go. And as long as you know that they're jerk offs and you know they're gonna be assholes, but you still keep that rapport, like, hey, how you doing? So nobody can say anything bad. He did this or he did that. But somebody who's an asshole, somebody's a jerk off, you just stay away from. You keep communication open, you keep a good rapport with them. Doesn't mean you have to like them. You just do it because that's just the way of the world. And it's like quiet politics. I'm sure it goes on all around the world in every kind of business in every culture, and there are people like that everywhere. There are people who are, they're somebody and they do things, but you don't care for the way they act. When it comes time for them to be with the ladies, you really don't like them. But are they a pain in the ass and they get sticky and they get shitty? Of course they do, because they're whiny and because they have money or they have an abundance of cash. They think like who the fuck they are, but really in general, you're a guy who's able to be an earner, but you're a bitch and you're freaking breaking balls. And sometimes you don't wind up on the good side of the bed all the time. If that's a good way to explain it.
Oh, good way to explain it. Absolutely. So if have you ever seen a guy who was such a pain in the ass, but he was so valuable? Like, what do you do? Again, what do you do with a guy like that?
Duke, you just keep, arm's distance. You keep in his good graces. And that's something that everybody could use. That they always keep in the good graces of somebody who's a jerk, because you don't know how much power they have and you don't know what could be said. But if you never spread no venom and don't say anything bad about that person, it can never come back to you.
Yeah, good point. Can never come back to you. Because this is the other thing about Ralph. Ralph wasn't just a guy who would say the most inappropriate thing at the most inappropriate time. Um, he was also a stone cold murderer. And, you know, you start correcting a guy like that, eventually you're going to have to do something about it. And that's a real thing. Guys who people who go out of their way to pick on others and try to bully others, typically they're pretty insecure people. So when you start giving them back what they're putting out, it's not uncommon, at least from what I've seen through life of people who have these type of characteristics. It's not uncommon that they want to immediately fight over it because they can't handle being on the receiving end of the nonsense that they dish out. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong here, Vito.
You're 100% right. I mean, you're not wrong in what you're saying. And being a stone cold killer like Ralph was, and being that outward, and then for the way he wound up, how he died, was deserving. Was deserving. Not only did he kill people, but he killed animals. And cruelty to animals is the number one thing I think in everybody's book. That's a line you don't cross. If you don't like an animal, you stay away. But you don't look to hurt animals. You don't look to make them suffer. You don't go out of your way to be that mean. I mean, everybody has pets. You know what I mean? And like, you can never love a pet, you know, so much that like you treat your pet like their family, and they're part of you. You hug them, you kiss them, you play with them, you do. And when I see people doing that, being mean to people, it makes me sick to my stomach. And like killing a horse because it cost too much money, but when the horse was good enough to make you money, the horse was good. Ralph didn't have that. When Tracy was good and giving him a good time and all this stuff, but when she created a problem, she was no good. When Jackie Jr. was in the mix and he was dating the mother, and the kid was just didn't like him, but he was never helpful to him. And then once he became a little helpful, then he became good. So a sense of loyalty, a sense of being a prick, a sense of being the guy who can make or break somebody, a manipulator. But when the tide turned and he was on the hot seat for Jenny Sachs, mole on the ass thing, or Paulie's mother, when he called Paulie's mother in the hospital and gave her the shits, you know, there's some things you just don't do in that, to people of that caliber.
Well said. Well said. What did you think of the way Ralph reacted when he was skipped over for a promotion? So it was time to move a guy up to be in charge of his own crew, and Tony gave that to Gigi, a guy who wasn't as aggressive as Ralph. He was more pragmatic, a guy that would consult with Tony and never challenged Tony's authority. Now, that doesn't mean he didn't speak up and give his opinion. Of course, he did. But at the end of the day, when Tony would give Gigi direction, Gigi would say, okay, yep, that's what we're doing. And that was the end of that. So Tony's like, look, I can work with a guy like that. He follows direction. He uses his expertise to voice his opinion, but at the end of the day, he doesn't challenge my authority, as opposed to Ralph, who's cracking jokes, but underneath those jokes, he's questioning the authority, and he's acting as if he knows better. He complains, "Oh, come on, why we got to do that?" He's one of those kind of guys. Uh, you don't promote a guy like that, because a guy like that is just going to continue to challenge you until you have to do something about it. So you stay where you are, even though you're the top earner. I'm going to promote this guy who's easier to work with. That's the way I interpreted that whole situation. And Ralph complained the whole time. And even though Ralph was supposed to report to Gigi, he would publicly make fun of Gigi and question him, and just do it in front of everybody. And Gigi wanted to crack him one, but Tony would always hold Gigi back and say, come on, don't worry about that. Come on. Because Tony also knew that Ralph was such a big earner that's like, we don't want to mess with that. How did you interpret that whole situation?
In one word, respect. Ralph had no respect for nobody and nothing, not even Tony. and he was just in the game because of his earn. If he couldn't earn, he would be worth nothing. Ralph didn't respect Tony, didn't respect the culture, didn't respect anything about being a wise guy. That's why he was passed over, because he disrespects the club, he disrespected Tony, disrespected this thing of ours. He didn't take it seriously. He was in, but he wasn't all the way in. But then when he finally got his stripes, it was okay. I'm going to give this guy his stripes. He's going to stop busting my balls. And then what? You know, and sometimes you give people what they want. It's not always what they wish for. That's for sure.
Damn right. Damn right. And that's the truth there. Dating a boss's family member. So in this case, Ralph started dating Janice, who's Tony's sister. How does that work? We talk about street politics and things like that. How does it work when a person in a crew is literally dating a relative of the boss?
Well, I think now you're saying Ralph dating
He didn't Ralph date
Jackie
Janice?
Creo's. No,
Oh,
that
wait a
was
second.
Richie Aprile.
Am I mixing it up?
Yeah, you're mixing it up.
Hold on. No, you know
You
what?
know,
He
dude,
did. Hey,
did.
hey.
When?
Hey. He absolutely dated Janice. I just pulled it up. He dated Rosalie Aprio. He also dated Valentina was the stripper girl that he beat up.
Right,
Tracy was Ronnie was his ex-wife. He dated a
right.
girl named Tracy, but yep, he dated Janice as well. He sure did.
What the fuck? Janice went around to everybody in the family. Was she fucking
What do
Gumad City? No wonder Tony can't stand her.
Like, give me, and not just Gumad. Give me that in Italian. What would you call that? Somebody who's bouncing around like that. A lady bouncing around.
A
What would you call
Bultana. A
it? Both
Bultana.
times.
I mean, really. I mean, I didn't even know that, he really hit that. I really can't fucking believe it. You just shocked me, dude. It's a friend of ours.
Friend
Friend
of
of
ours.
ours.
So I restate the question though. What do you do with that when again, this is the relative of a boss. They all grew up together, so let's call it what it is. It's not like they don't know each other. That's usually the case. Everybody grew up together, but this thing happens. From what you've seen, how does that even work?
Well, let's put it this way. I've had chances to date bosses' daughters or, you know, um, my friends' sisters who connected, and I didn't, and it was just not that I didn't like them or didn't, and it didn't even have to do with who they were. It was just the situation that I would put myself in that I didn't want to deal with. If everybody could follow that. Sometimes people think, yeah, I'm gonna get a job, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that, and you're gonna score big. It doesn't always happen. And then if you get in the family and they find out what you really like, because the girl's gonna fucking talk shit once you have your first fight, you gotta watch what you say. Can't talk bad about the family, can't do this, can't do that. Then it's a big fucking to do. You know what I mean? And then they look at you different, they treat you different. So in hindsight, anybody who's thinking about dating a mob boss's daughter or be getting involved in a family or try to get in the back door that way, don't do it. It's not worth the trouble.
It's not worth the trouble at all because in relationships things happen, and now you, as the boss, your sister, your daughter, your cousin, whoever, they come to you and they tell you about all the terrible things that this guy did. Now you kind of have to do something about it. You know what I mean? This is the Phil Leotardo thing all over again. where his cousin was being disrespected because her husband was stepping out with men, and he had to do something about it. So, Ralph, who likes to get handsy, and he's abusing women and being a jerk, it's not like Tony can sit back and allow that to go on. So, boy, what a mess. What a mess that was. In the end, Ralph ultimately has to go. Do you think that was the right decision?
Yes, enough was enough. And Tony had enough, and he had to put up with a lot of people who were like him, and he had enough. And, being the boss, you don't ask somebody to do your dirty work, you do it yourself. It's just like Vito, going back to WCW days and taking care of business when you know something has to be done. You want it done the right way, you do it yourself. Sometimes you have enjoyment of kicking the shit out of somebody because one, they deserve it, and number two, you know what the outcome is going to be. So some bosses take care of their own dirty work, and then they have somebody clean it up, and that's the way it goes.
I'll say this right now, because I've spent many, many years. I was fortunate enough, even at a young age, to be put in positions of leadership. So when you're in charge, and obviously, folks, I'm not talking about the life. I'm literally talking about working. But when you're given responsibility of being a leader, you start having different kind of conversations with the bosses. This is why we do this. They start cluing you in on stuff. This is why you got to make sure that happens. Um, you do A and B in order to get the end result of C. So you start looking at the workplace differently, and you start caring about different things. So as you develop in that way, now you start recruiting people, right? Oh, so and so lost their job, or so and so went and found another job, or for whatever reason they got to go. So now I got an open spot. Now I got to go find somebody else. So you literally start recruiting, and you start interviewing people. Eventually, you make a decision. You hire somebody. You train them. You evaluate them, and then you decide if you're going to promote them or not. Right? That's the whole process of being a manager. At some point, you find people so talented that they could even be better than you in certain aspects, especially like say if you have a sales job. It's like, wow, that guy's a better salesperson than me. Okay. So then you start thinking to yourself, I could help this person get better at other aspects of the job and eventually promote this person. And it'll look good on me because I was the one that developed them. So they're always going to be from my tree. That's one way to look at it. And that's more often than not, that's the mature way to look at it. But there's another way. I got to be careful with this person because if they're acting like a jerk and they're not taking direction right and they think they know better, but their numbers are still high, if I promote this person, they may eventually replace me. The bosses might say, "Hey, yeah, he's a jerk, but he earns better than you do, so he's in." So maybe I don't promote that guy. Maybe I get somebody else that's easier to work with, which is exactly what Tony did with Gigi in relation to Ralph. This happens in real life and in every aspect of every industry all the time. You, as a person in charge, have to make that decision. So now for everybody else, they look and they see how this goes down. Why is the jerk getting promoted? Or, hey, he's a jerk, but he makes more money than everybody else. He earns more money than everybody else. How come he's not getting promoted? Why is this other guy who just yes sir, no sir? Why is he getting promoted? There's always that little dichotomy going on in every single workplace. Vito, correct me if I'm wrong. Have you seen that even in the entertainment industry?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Are you kidding me? I mean, I think it's just the way of the world, the way it goes. I mean, it happens in every single line of business. And if you're asking me if this happens in a line of work that I was doing for 34 years and still going, why does this guy get this? And what the hell did he do? And what is he doing? Absolutely. 100% this happens. I've seen it. I've witnessed it. I have been passed over for other people, even though nobody could shine my shoes. And I'm like, okay, what the fuck, man? It's bullshit. It's just the way of the world. It's called politics.
That's exactly what it is. It's politics, and you got to find a way to navigate it, no matter who you are in that scenario. Again, maybe you're Ralph, maybe you're Gigi, maybe you're Tony, the boss. But everyone has a role to play, and it's like dominoes. You move one thing, and the whole thing gets affected by it. That's just the way it is. Uh, Tony really didn't ever replace Ralph properly. The closest he got was Vito, who, in the end, again, Phil ended up whacking Vito. But Tony had a hard time once Ralph, he had to straighten Ralph out and make him disappear. Because again, that guy was a big earner. He was the top earner, no question about it. He was earning, Ralph alone was earning more than everybody else put together. And that's a big deal. So, to lose a guy like that is tough. But you can't have people trying to usurp your authority, because if others who are too weak to stand up to a guy like that, they want to go with a guy like that, the next thing you know, you got a whole mutiny going on. And that's never good. We see that on every single, even in politics, we see that sort of thing. Donald Trump has nothing to do with the Republican Party, but he was able to step in and usurp the entire party and really take control of the party and get people to go his way, because he's loud and boisterous, because he's forceful, because he's kind of a jerk, because he has an arrogance and a self-confidence about him that most people wish they had. So people fall in line and follow a person like that because they have the strength that I don't. So I want to stick with the strong guy. You know what I mean? Meanwhile, you got a whole system that's existed for as long as the nation has been alive. And it's like, for this guy to just completely be the complete opposite of what that system is, it actually has the potential to tear the whole thing down. So what is the party going to be after Trump? And we're going to find out in 4 years. But it's another interesting wrinkle there, where it's like, you got two choices as voters. You got two choices as party leaders. You either allow the guy to continue to rise up, or you shut it down immediately because it's too dangerous and it threatens the whole system. It's the same thing in this situation with the Sopranos. I believe Tony Soprano had to make an example out of Ralph, because if he didn't, Ralph would ultimately be the person to make Tony Soprano disappear. Tell me if I'm wrong here, Vito.
Nope, you're absolutely right. And sometimes you got to take matters into your own hands. And, you have to take care of you, got to take care of your business. And, when Tony had to take care of Ralph, he made a statement and he made it known. Nobody is gonna ruin this for me. I don't care how much you earn, what you do, what you're bringing to the table. I'm still the boss, and I'm gonna be here to stay. And nobody's gonna disrespect the family.
That's it. That this thing of ours has to be bigger than any one individual. It even has to be bigger than even one individual's earning ability. That was always Phil's argument. Doesn't this thing mean anything? It's supposed to mean something. You know what I mean? Let me tell you a couple of three things. It's supposed to mean something. As soon as it doesn't mean anything anymore, then what are we doing it for? And that's really the story of it all, you know? So there you have it on Ralph, folks. By far, because of his treatment of women especially, just a rotten character. Unfortunately, there are a lot more Ralphs out there than there are the opposite, especially when you start talking about organized crime. And that's unfortunate, but it's the truth. So it is what it is there. Any final thoughts on that there, Vito?
No, I think it was a good segment. I know Ralph wasn't the most interesting character, but he was probably the most disgusting. And that says a lot for the whole show. But as you know, people will listen, they will chime in, they will make their constructive criticisms, and they will give their thoughts on Ralph. And next week will be a better week because we're going to do some better characters, and we're going to do greater things here on the Friend of Ours.
Yeah, I'm thinking of Paulie, beloved, different kind of guy, old school guy. Here's a funny part about Paulie. Paulie survived the series. He was the
Yeah.
only main character, that was actually involved that didn't get whacked.
Well,
So
Paulie's an old timer.
yeah,
He
yeah.
knew how to maneuver through the waves.
Well, and that's what's going to be fun about it because, and I don't want you to answer it now, Vito, but I think I even asked you this. Is it possible that Paulie made a deal because he knew that the Soprano family was going to get taken out, and he made a deal that he'll fall in line and he'll do whatever needs to be done to keep everybody who survives in line as long as he gets to run it. But maybe Carmine can be the boss of bosses or something like that. He's not going to challenge that. That's a very interesting question that's been asked ever since that series ended. Why was Paulie spared? Did he make a deal? So you got a week to think about that, brother, because when we talk about it on next episode, it's going to be interesting to hear what you have to say about that. Have you, first of all, have you ever considered that maybe Paulie cut a deal?
Nah, I don't think he cut. I don't think he cut a deal with the feds. He was loyal to the Soprano family. I just think he was one of those soldiers who believed in the old regime.
But is it possible that he cut a deal with one of the other families, like, say, Carmine, who's out in Florida, who I maintain, I think Carmine, in the end, orchestrated everything to have everybody take themselves out so he could take over the position that his father had.
Carmine didn't
Carmine was
have the
considered a
brains.
fool.
Nope, Carmine didn't have the brains. He was not a negotiator. He couldn't do it. He couldn't handle, being in the middle and being a consigliere for things. He couldn't do it. He didn't have it in him.
But see, this is what I'm saying. He was always in the middle. Once Johnny Sack took control, and Carmine had to fall in line because Johnny had some of his guys taken out. You notice that every type of negotiation, every type of sit down and what have you, Carmine would always be brought in as a neutral party trying to maintain peace. But here's what I think, and here's my political mind talking. I think Carmine was actually creating more harm than good. And he was kind of encouraging these guys to stay at each other's throats because he knew if you guys take each other out, it's going to be a lot easier for me to step in. So in that sense, he might have been the smartest guy in the room.
Carmine was a dummy. He was a jackass. Couldn't handle it.
Well, you're still upset about the fact that he was fixing wet T-shirt contests down in Miami. That's your problem.
Stop. Like when you look at Carmine, he's like, he looks like a fucking jerk off. He deserved a slap every time he sat there in the meeting. And Phil, whatever happened with that thing. Which is a lot of shit we could talk about. You know what I mean? Why would you bring that up, Carmine? Why would you bring that up? I don't know.
Was it you or Noel who said that? Who said that to me this week? Was it you or Noel? Why would you bring that up? Who said that to me this week?
It was probably my wife.
I forgot about that, but that was so hilarious. He's over here talking about things in a negotiation. He's bringing up things that people are still upset about.
That's what I'm talking about. So what the fuck problem was he solving, that fucking asshole? All right?
But see,
ruined the fucking show.
But see, here's my point, though. I don't think that was an accident. I think he was doing that on purpose so there wouldn't be peace. I think he wanted.
He wasn't that smart. Read between the lines, all right? Go back to your fucking crayons and fucking coloring books and learn the fucking something about the game. I'm trying to teach you here, all right, Ralph?
No, you calling me Ralph? I'm not. Listen, I'm more like who could I be? Who would I be in The Sopranos? That's a good question. Wow.
So, you could be the kids making the fucking gabagool sandwiches for Tony in the deli.
Hey, listen, that kid survived at least. All right. So you know what? You know who I am? I'm the agent. Agent, what is it? Morris? What's the guy's name? I'm the agent. There it is.
Yeah, you probably are an agent. You're probably taping a bunch of shit right now to get me fucking clipped or bring an indictment against me. All right, but that's how you are. I'll be the agent. Of course you're the agent. You're not fucking Italian. You're not with this thing of ours. You're not one of ours. You're not with us. You're on the outside looking in.
As I get ready to celebrate St. Patrick's Day, because yes, folks, via Jamaica, we have a strong an Irish population. And in fact, I believe it's my grandmother's grandmother was an Irish lady who married a black Jamaican guy. She was a white Irish lady. And that's why I think it's 32% Northern Irish. Figure that one out. Figure that out. Huh?
All right. That's for another show. Maybe we start a new show. Who am I? Who am I?
Who am I?
Who am I?
Duke Loves Wrestling on Facebook or Twitter, DukeLovesWrestling@gmail.com. Let me know what you think. In fact, why don't we do this? What Sopranos character is Vito, and what Sopranos character am I? All right, we'll figure this one out. We'll let the audience decide that. Vito, once again, plug away, brother.
All right, guys, you can follow us at the Big Vito Brand on X. Get with us on TikTok at the Big Vito Brand, Instagram, the Big Vito Brand, AOL, the Big Vito Brand. Guys, you want to book me for any shows or anything coming up, even to do podcasts, but you're going to have to pay a VIG. Contact me at bigvito@bigvito.com. Anybody in the movie business, let's get together. Let's make some terrific hits. Let's make a new mafia movie. You know what I mean? Who am I?
No cleaver, though. We're not making cleavers, so don't even bring that into the mix, all right? Jesus.
No, we won't.
Anyway.
We won't.
Without further ado, Vito, give us our word of the week.
I believe Easter is coming up, right?
Yep.
Easter is coming up, and a Buena Pasqua to all our Italian friends.
Buena Pasqua.
A friend of ours, he'll stand up tall. Through gunfire smoke, he'll never fall. With heart of gold and steel resolve, a mystery we'll never solve. A mystery